directions of activities, and the staffers to whom belongs in political partisans. And the file with which we are starting today's meeting is very important, of course, no doubt, especially in the context of pandemic. And having in mind your Tomasz and Francis. Francis, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. So once again, thank you very much for finding time. And let's start actually, as we agreed, with McKinsey and Company studies overview. I guess that for our members of the committee it would be very interesting, having in mind, as I said, that present situation, especially, and possible perspectives in which ways we could move forward the process as such in political sense, of course, but debating the situation here in Lithuania as well. So let me introduce Tomasz, who is a managing partner of McKinsey and Company. He is one of the leader of McKinsey's electric power and natural gas practices Central Europe and co-leader on transmission and distribution service line across the whole Europe. So Tomasz, thank you very much once again, and please, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for inviting us as McKinsey into your audience. And I feel truly privileged that we can share with you the findings of our research. And please feel free to ask us many questions and indicate what would be interesting for you, of course, in course of the presentation. We have prepared a presentation as a short summary, executive summary of the findings of our research that we conducted throughout the second part of 2020, and I'll share these findings in the form of the PowerPoint presentation. So I hope that you can see that, and I'll try to put it on the full screen. Please confirm if you can see that, please. Okay, just want to ensure that everybody feels well with this.
Yes, I guess we all will see that.
Excellent. So let me walk you through the key findings of our research, and we called it Digital Challengers in the Next Normal. And this is, because of the context of where we all across our countries in Central Europe, but beyond that in broader Europe, but also globally, we landed in the second part of 2020. However, the research that we are elaborating on is actually a continuation of the effort that we started back in 2018, where we analyzed the digital trends in the digital economy development with all the prospects, opportunities, but also challenges across the entire Central Europe in course of opportunities for us. And we shared these findings also with regards to Lithuanian deep dives. However, this time we thought we need to update it given the dynamics that we observed over the first months of pandemics in across Europe and especially Central Europe. Let me start maybe from the very first view. So if we look across the regions, and this isn't very arbitrary, call how we call these parts of Europe, but we just split Europe across the big five. So the largest five called Old Europe, Western European states, the digital front runners, so predominantly Scandinavia, and digital challengers, which is Central Europe. Of course, you may always ask, whether the Baltics are closer to digital front runners and challengers. And I'll tell you, this is not the obvious discussion, and I'll show you many arguments where you may feel that also Lithuania is on the edge between these two regions, which I think our data outlines. But given the legacy of some data, it was still closer to Central Europe. But what predominantly it's saying is that actually, in terms of the economic growth, the digital challengers, which means the Central European states, they grew far faster in terms of economic growth than not only the big five, EU states, but also the digital frontrunners. And as you see here, it was over the course of 5 years, it was 115% of average economic growth of the region, compared to 60% for digital frontrunners and 46% for the Big Five, which shows how dynamic is the region and what are the opportunities ahead of Central Europe in terms of economic growth dynamics, of course, pre-COVID. We've also analyzed what could be the scenarios of a digital economy growth in both Central Europe as a digital challenger spot, but also for Lithuania specifically. And as you see, we have the two lines here. The one line drafted between 2016 and 2025, which is a white bubbles, is our business as usual scenario. What is a business as usual? This means that if we do not stretch ourselves, if we do not change the course where we are, digital economy across the digital challengers will grow from 76 billion euros to 136, so we'll almost double over the course of 10 years between 2016 and 2025. However, the aspirational scenario, which actually shows that where we can reach if we follow the pathways of the countries or the regions that actually pursued more ambitious digital strategies and the directions, we could nearly double it and move to 276 billion euros of cumulative GDP in 2025. The logic is fairly similar for Lithuania. You may see that the base case, which is the business as usual scenario, moves us from 2.1 billion euros to 3.7 billion euros. However, this can be even more amplified, so nearly threefold, 3 times as high, if we follow the aspirational scenario. And we'll elaborate what does it mean in the aspirational scenario. What we also did, we have checked how both digital challengers and including Lithuania did by 2019. And the message is, I would say, a bit in between. So on one hand side, already we can see that Lithuania did better than the business as usual scenario. So clearly the country is delivering on the journey. However, it could still be more ambitious. So we are saying it's a good direction, but it can be still accelerated to amplify even more this digital economy growth. What does it mean? Now, when we talk about the first months of 2020, and if you see, this white bubble, this is showing the growth, the rate of growth, the average rate of growth year over year between 2017 and 2019. What it means, the Central and Eastern Europe was growing at average 7.8% in terms of digital economy growth, compared to Lithuania growing at 9.6%, which of course can absolutely make you proud of the faster digital economy growth in Lithuania. But what is, I think, even more important is that in just the first 5 months of 2020, the growth in Central Europe was almost 2 times as fast, at 14.2% growth just between these 5 months, which is a massive acceleration of digital economy growth and adoption in CE. But in Lithuania, this acceleration was even faster. So not only the starting point between 2017 and 2019 was faster, but it was even more accelerated to 22.6%, which is of course a great result and nearly 2.4 times faster growth than we've observed in year-over-year growth in the past years. What we've also seen is that this is not only seen at the macroeconomic level, but also what we saw is in terms of share of users. And let me recall a research that we conducted across 4 of the Central European states. And as said, I think the direction for Lithuania should be similar. However, it could be even more amplified. And here it's Poland, it's Hungary, Czech Republic, and Romania. We see that there were 25% more users in the second part of 2020 compared to before COVID. So this was the acceleration, 25% more share of users that at least accessed one digital service from the beginning of pandemics. At the same time, when we look at how many sectors were accessed digitally, it moved from 2.5 to 4.2, which means that the average user was not only in 2.5 sectors, which often was banking or e-commerce, but actually was more than 4, which means that also, not only in terms of number of users and the width, but it's also the width of usage increased. So we have 12 million new users, digital users in Central Europe since the beginning of pandemics, and we had 40% more users, 65 and above, accessing online services. I think we've never seen such an acceleration of digital usage adoption in the history of our region. When we look across the sectors, and we've done our research across the core sectors of the economy, and again, I'm referring to these 4 states that we've mentioned. We looked across banking, we looked at telcos, apparel, grocery, utilities, insurance, and travel. You can very clearly see, that this growth was just all across the board. It was relatively the lowest in travel because, as we know, pandemics limited travel heavily. So, and it was already quite digitally penetrated a sector of the economy. Therefore, this growth is not so great. However, there are areas where it was absolutely outstanding, and the one that we highlight here is the public sector, where actually, we see that across these 4 states, the growth multiplier of digital adoption is almost 2 times, which means that we have 2 times as many users that use at least one public service online as we had before COVID. I think this is a massive shift in terms of digital adoption of the public services across these states. But not only there, you could see a massive growth in grocery because of the home deliveries that accelerated so heavily, massive growth in entertainment, but also across banking, across social media, of course, and even utilities. So what do we see as strengths or lessons that we still believe that position digital challengers and CE states as well positioned for the future digital economy growth? I think there are a couple of things. So first of all, we have a very strong macroeconomic performance. The gap in terms of GDP per capita and purchasing power parity between the digital challengers and digital frontrunners decreased over the course of last 15 years from 60% to 30%. So like half of the gap got decreased. The great news for Lithuania is that your acceleration was even faster. So you're outperforming the digital challengers, so even the Central European peers with this regards. In terms of the vibrant ecosystem, I think that there is a very clear acceleration of the absorption of VC funding and digital ventures funding across the entire CE region, with the total value of more than 30 billion euros of CE unicorns as of 2020, and more than 1.5 billion euros of VC investments in digital challengers in just 2019. I think if we look at the penetration for Lithuania, the numbers are even higher. Of course, not by the total scale, but by scale relative to the size of the economy, and you can be truly proud of that. It's more than 168 million with in the same period of time. Quality of digital infrastructure in Lithuania, 98% coverage of 4G compared to 92%, which is already very high in digital challengers. However, we have also some of the challenges. So I think primary and secondary education, 7 out of 10 digital challenger countries are a bit below OECD average in terms of the PISA study. Lithuania is just slightly below, but I think this is one of the challenges. We see that we're doing very well, but not as well as we could. And at the same time, there is a drop in terms of STEM graduates over the years. So between 2016 and 2018, we've observed that there's a 14 percentage points drop in terms of graduates, annual flow of graduates from 234,000 to 216,000 STEM graduates across Central Europe. The good news for Lithuania is that I think you kept it stable, so it doesn't apply to you. I mean, Lithuania managed to have a steady flow of STEM graduates in the country, which I think holds as another stronghold. So let me just reassume: we have a great economic performance to build on. a vibrant and growing tech ecosystem, very strong quality of digital infrastructure. We can still do better in terms of our quality of education, and there is a difference between Lithuania and Central Europe. I think the digital challenges, they need to recap on these STEM graduates, and the supply of STEM, which stands for mathematics, technology, engineering, science, graduates in the region. Further levers for digitalization journey, I think there are two additional good news that we've seen. For the first time in 30 years, the Central European immigration exceeded emigration, which means that there were net more people coming than leaving, the region, which I think it's a great shift and the change that we haven't seen in the previous years. But also, if you look across the immigrants and the entire population, the immigrants, they have on average higher share of higher education, 34% to the average of the whole CE population, which means that also immigrants that we are actually attracting are on average a bit better educated than the average of our societies. And at the same time, of course, we are not blind to the topic that is so important for the recent discussions at the European level, which is the Recovery and Resilience Fund, and it's focused on the digital transformation in Europe, and of course the opportunities that are actually enabled by this funding. And before I conclude, maybe let me just focus on, so what could be the key recommendations that we see that should be considered and in course of the discussions. First of all, I think the broader collaboration between states, enabling the creation of more harmonized digital business environment, CE, higher scale for scaling digital businesses, and at the same time introducing a best practice sharing just to enable the firms, the digital challenges just to grow across the borders and scale up between the countries seems like a relevant growth enabler. The growth of digital ecosystem, especially across the SMEs, but also by enabling the early funding of startups and even fostering this vibrant startups ecosystem with also tech clusters, seems as the direction that has been yielding already with a growing digital startups in the region and should accelerate even further. Public services digitization, as you see, given that our digital penetration of the public services grew twofold over the last year and beyond in the first months of COVID pandemics, this seems like the direction that is an absolute must go. But it should be followed by the investment in the digital talent. I think we see that in terms of education, we can adjust the curriculums to focus more on digital education, both among the students, the graduates, but also in the lifelong journey to actually redeploy the talent and think about what is the composition of talent of the future to help people redirect their career paths and enable digital access in their jobs. And of course, focus on the right migration to adopt the talent that is needed and that may fill the gaps also for such a fast growth and adoption of certain roles and services in the economy. In the business, adjustment of the business models. So the digital adoption seems inevitable across almost every single aspect and segment of our economies, but also the improvement of operational efficiency. Introduction of all digital offering in channels, data analytics, AI, but also with regards to how the companies think about their IT architecture. Flexible operating models, including the adoption of Agile, could significantly enable faster growth and adoption of digital practices across the companies. And we see it both among the large companies in the region, but also among the smaller or faster growing entrepreneurs in Central and Eastern Europe. And finally, the reskilling and upskilling. So actually to ensure that all the labor that we have across the business is fit for the future with regards to their skills, understanding of digital opportunities and shifts. And finally, what does it mean for individuals? It means that for us in 2021 and beyond, it is a story of a lifelong learning. We need to invest in digital skills. We need to ensure that regardless of our age, we are ready to adopt into the new technologies and tap into the services and accessibility. And we've seen it, across also the elderly population. This 40% growth in penetration of digital services in the population 65 years and above. It shows clearly how important that these digital services could be if we face a situation where actually some of these services are not available in the conventional way. And we need to take advantage of these digital opportunities to actually accelerate also our career paths. So let me just recap, and this is just the last page, and I'll hand it over back to the further discussion. You can reach out our report and the full findings, which we made public and on McKinsey.com. And I think, what are the conclusions that we have? Potential of digitization is significant. I think this is even an understatement. It is just huge for the region. And this is even more true for Lithuania. I think you've proved that you can excel in the digital economy growth, and your ambition can be even higher. We are not taking this advantage of this opportunity. So, besides, we can see that we are going above the business as usual case. Still, we can do even better. And pandemics, I think, showed us that this acceleration can be much stronger, much faster. Now, the question is, to what extent do we use this opportunity to tap into this growth? Seeing that the digital economy is growing much faster than the rest of the economy across any of the Central European states. Our foundations in the region are strong, but I think the talent pool still requires attention and requires a boost. I know that these STEM graduates numbers are stable in Lithuania, but I think it is a challenge with the demographic shift in the region. We need to focus on ensuring that we have the right talent and we have the right skills to pursue these opportunities. Restrictions related to COVID-19 increased the adoption of the digital tools and made actually that digitization became an imperative for most of our aspects of our lives and businesses. And clearly show that this shift and change is absolutely inevitable. And then finally, I think for all the policymakers, but also businesses, this is the time to act now and digitize as fast as we can, because actually this is a one direction, and we can clearly see that opportunities in front of us, and it's only up to us to what extent we enable the faster growth of this part of the economy, and hence the entire economy and our societies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I would like to notice that today we received just the hard copies of your report, and those copies will be distributed among our members of our committee. So my question is to my colleagues: have we any questions right now, or we just could move to another presentation, and then we'll give the question for both of our guests. So if anybody has some question, please go forward. Zygmantas, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very interesting presentation, and thank you, Thomas, once more. Yes, you mentioned, and in your presentation we saw that digitalization in all sectors is boosted, and it depends on COVID-19. But for future, I think it's very important to create a new infrastructure for our forthcoming development in this sector. And what's your opinion? Because to create infrastructure is quite expensive business, because I know from the future. And what your proposal and what your opinion about G5 principles and etc. Thank you.
Shall I take it one, or should we just gather all the questions? And what's the?
At the moment, I have just seen one hand open, so it was Zygmunt. So please, if it's possible for you to answer, go ahead.
Sure. I think it's hard for me or us to judge which technology and which infrastructure you should invest in, and that would require a separate research to elaborate on this. I think for us it is very clear that we can see that digital economy is growing much faster than the non-digital economy. We've seen in the COVID that this economy has accelerated tremendously. And that when we compare the benchmarks, also for Lithuania, it can grow even faster. Now, whether this is only to infrastructure, I don't think so. I think, it is also due to availability of talent, availability of services, adoption of culture, the right role modeling, but also, adoption of digital services at the public sector at scale, to basically almost like have it as a predominant theme in the strategy for the development of all of these services. And the same for businesses. So we clearly see, that the last months and 2020 was a clear signal to businesses that this will happen much faster than we thought. And it can happen already with the current infrastructure. And I think, any enablement of the future technologies and how fast it happens and when do you make these decisions to enable them and pursue them, that's of course, to be researched and evaluated. But clearly, any shift towards that will not slow it down. And this is what we wanted to underline. So I think, regardless if you pursue this strategy or that strategy towards the infrastructure investment, it will accelerate. But then, to specifically address, whether you should heavily invest in 5G or not invest in 5G, that would require separate research.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Shall I?
Mr. Chairman, you see my hand?
Lucas, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello to all of you colleagues. It's nice to see you now in, at least on my side, on a new role. Very glad to continue the conversation. And thank you for taking the time and presenting some newly updated insights. Some things remain as they were, some things are new. And talking about the new elements, I think as never it has been before, the digitalization agenda is now more and more closely put together with the green agenda. We can definitely hear a lot of it coming from European Commission, seeing the new Green Deal and Green Initiative being intertwined and looking at how those two could complement each other. And in your presentation, Mr. Tomasz, I saw that there was this aspect wasn't really mentioned. Do you see that as one of the elements that could be working hand in hand in our region as well? And in what areas, or would you say that it might be within contradiction with each other? Very interested to hear a little bit of your views on this aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and let me try to address it. And given my also personal focus on the electric power and the energy markets, I think this is close to my interest. Clearly, we can see that digitization goes with the higher consumption of electricity, and we can see that that also decarbonization and across the states implies higher electricity consumption across states. So these two go hand by hand. Also, what we see is actually, with the shift towards more renewable resources, the management of energy systems becomes more and more complex, and therefore, digitization of the entire infrastructure in the energy space becomes so much relevant and important to actually make it resilient, and also to enable further penetration of renewables, whether these are different technologies, whether they are distributed or whether they are concentrated. That's, of course, a different discussion. But clearly, we can see that across the largest clients or the largest energy companies, decarbonization and the green agenda goes hand in hand with digital agenda and digitization. So if you ask me, what are probably, the two most recurring topics that we have with the largest energy players across Europe and beyond, this goes hand in hand. Either we talk about electrification, decarbonization, or we talk about decarbonization, digitalization. So this goes hand in hand. I think, they are completely complementary, and actually, I think to very much extent, the enabler to further decarbonization is digitization of the infrastructure.
Thank you once again, Thomas. And let's switch to another guest, Francis. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, everything is okay. I just needed to mention that we already received, right before the meeting, the hard copy of your study. I invited to be with us one of the author of your study. It's a former Minister Rimantas Žylis, who is with us. Thank you very much, Minister. And before opening the floor for Francis, I would like to tell that she is a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. I guess it's not necessary to introduce what the council means. So, and a senior director at McLarty Associates. She previously served as Vice President, European Union and Special Initiatives at the Council, and currently lead the Transatlantic Digital Marketplace Initiative. So once again, thank you very much, Francis, being with us, and please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, staff, and colleagues. I'm truly honored and delighted to be here today and to discuss the work of the Atlantic Council on digitalization, and especially Central and Eastern Europe. I am particularly keen here to discuss the work of our eminent 2020 task force, which made recommendations to last year's 3 Cs initiative summit on the opportunities and prospects for regional cooperation on digitalization. The task force was co-chaired by Maciej Witucki of Poland and Paolo Dobriansky of the US, and included many eminent experts. We especially appreciated the active role of former Minister Žylis, and it's great to see him here today. I also wanted to give a shout out to Jorn Fleck, who has joined us for at least part of the session, and who was part of the team, led the team that actually put pen to paper and took all our great discussions and made them coherent for everyone else. Let me also express my appreciation for the work of McKinsey in designing policy in this area. It's crucial to have data, to know the facts, and also to see how Lithuania and Central Europe generally rank compared to others. McKinsey's work on digital challengers, which we have used in our work for several years, has been invaluable, as has been the European Commission's Digital Economy and Society Index. Lithuania has done well in its own drive for digitalization. As you've seen, it ranks 14th out of the 28 EU member states in the DESI Index, now 13th out of 27 since the Brits have left, and is ahead of most of the others in the 2004 enlargement, which I think is an important benchmark. The government has clearly been proactive, supporting startups and SMEs, distributing devices to those suddenly plunged into remote education and work by COVID, investing in upskilling, moving strongly into e-government and the digital provision of public services, and I think being a leader in the fintech area. However, there are challenges, and I note particularly the Ministry of Economy's roadmap from 2019 to 2030, which points to the challenges of digitalization in the manufacturing sectors, particularly among smaller companies that are not producing highly technical products. Even in those traditional industries, however, it's clear that digitalization will be needed for survival in these times of just-in-time supply chains, digitalization of products and services, and constant demand for innovation. The overwhelming message of our report is that no one country, no matter how successful, is capable of truly succeeding alone in the global digital economy. Lithuania is a small country and a small market, as you all know. Your industry is linked to supply chains across Europe. You must now think beyond Lithuania in terms of digitalization. Without doing that, you will not grow your own economy and have your people prosper. And second, and this was a big emphasis in our report, without looking beyond Lithuania to the region, you will not be able to play a truly effective role in Brussels in setting Europe's approach to digitalization. When our task force looked at the Central European region and talked to experts and leaders, 3 challenges emerged: lack of adequate capital, a gradual but significant brain drain. So the numbers that my McKinsey colleague, that Tomasz, put out for the last year are good, but they are not yet a trend. And reliance on low-cost manufacturing that could easily move elsewhere or be undercut by innovations elsewhere. There's also a huge opportunity, however. The coronavirus has demonstrated to all of us how essential it is to move to the digital economy, and I think has moved the political discussion quite far forward. The disease has been a great tragic disruptor, but also a great force for innovation. Digitalization is now much more pervasive in our lives, and the question is whether and how we will backtrack. The answers to these challenges will not be found individually by different countries. Lithuania will never have enough capital on its own, and Vilnius by itself will not become a new mecca for tech workers like Silicon Valley. Every government will have its own initiatives. As we talked with all our Central European colleagues, everyone could point to some initiative that their own government was pursuing. In our report, we tried to stay away from those, however. So if you look in our report and you're looking for a judgment or recommendations about how Lithuania can improve its own particular national policies, they won't be there. What we tried to do was to say, since you need to cooperate, how can we look at building that cooperation? And let me be clear about 2 points on that cooperation. First, regional cooperation does not have to involve all of the countries in the region in all projects. It's likely to be much more a series of coalitions of the willing, with some countries engaged on some matters and others focused on different priorities. There's no need to be theological about this. Flexibility is much more productive. And it may be that in some cases, EU member states outside of Central Europe may prove to be very valuable collaborators. We heard a lot about Austria, for example, in the more southern areas of Central Europe. And it may be that there are other neighbors, such as Ukraine, who are also very valuable for including in a complex of regional cooperation. Second, despite the group being labeled as digital challengers, the countries and being grouped together, the countries are very diverse. They have different challenges, priorities, and advantages, different levels of digitalization, different strengths, different weaknesses. This should not be an excuse not to collaborate. Instead, these differences should be seen as complementary, providing a foundation for cooperation rather than head-to-head competition. We heard a lot about head-to-head competition for data centers and things like that during our task force. Countries that prioritize the development of different technologies, for example, still have a lot to talk about joint shared challenges of regulation, of securing capital, or of creating the needed workforce, and can learn from each other in these areas, even though they differ on the specific emerging technologies that their own programs are emphasizing. Our report had a lot of recommendations, so I'm going to dive into those. I want to save some time at the end for a brief update on how this relates to the Biden administration, and the current wave of legislation being proposed in Brussels, and the position of Central Europe. Our first set of recommendations focused on creating an ecosystem in which innovation and emerging technologies can flourish. We avoided identifying particular technologies, linking them with particular countries, and trying to, as a task force, choose where the emphasis should be. Instead, we tried to provide ways of the countries making those decisions for themselves. Excuse me. So our first suggestion is that each government, and then regionally, needs to map its strengths and priorities in terms of emerging technology. That means that everyone should have a good idea of what they actually do well and what they don't do well. What are the technologies that they have the resources to advance and which that they do not? We heard a lot of everyone trying to focus on artificial intelligence, but you shouldn't all focus on artificial intelligence and just leave it at that. It should be at least one more level precise. Artificial intelligence in healthcare or in fintech, Internet of Things in energy as it applied to energy, E-government, perhaps focused more on procurement, not the whole span of e-government. Anything that is vague is not a priority. Once the mapping is done, a second recommendation is to convene clusters within the region, perhaps one on healthcare, one on energy. This could lead to another recommendation, the creation of regional innovation hubs, each focused on a different technology, bringing together government experts, innovators, research institutions, etc. Not everyone would have an AI hub. Maybe there would be 3 AI hubs in the whole region. But there could, and one hub might be more on AI and healthcare, another one in fintech. It could be quite different. This will boost cross-regional collaboration. And just imagine as you have all the experts, for example, on the uses of blockchain in fintech or e-government coalesce around Vilnius, for example, in a hub there. 2 examples of such clusters. One is to focus on the resilience of 5G technology. We are now at a point where ENISA is working on cybersecurity standards and certifications for the EU, and the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Group is doing similar work more in the defense space. How can Lithuania and regional partners contribute to this work? How does this work with the toolkit on 5G resilience, 5G cybersecurity that the EU put forward at the beginning of this year? How do you bring together public and private sector actors to advance a practical understanding of how standards and certifications would actually work? Another cluster could be focused around digital public services and bring together e-government innovators who aim to establish common standards and solutions. These efforts could focus less on what we think of in terms of e-governance and voting and things like that, and more on issues that have cross-border relevance, such as e-procurement, digital CMR for customs, e-invoicing, etc. How do these actually work? A key part of any ecosystem is education. And my McKinsey colleague quite rightly focused quite a lot on that. Central Europe, including Lithuania, is already strong on STEM education, but we need much more innovative forms of education for a constantly upskilling workforce. We need more focused short courses, perhaps with certificates rather than degrees. We know apprenticeships work in manufacturing. Is there a digital apprenticeship program that would work? What has actually been done? What are the different lessons that we've seen around the region? And what else can be done? This experimentation could be based within a network of digital universities, Central European digital universities, with each, like the technology hubs, each university focused on a particular element and providing education on the practicalities of innovation and technology development, perhaps with some business management thrown in. So not just STEM, but actually how do you grow technology? One specific idea for a committee focused on the future of Lithuania would be a study that aims to examine existing educational programs and ask how to adapt them to the digital age, and that could work with colleagues in other parliaments to identify successful examples. A second major set of recommendations focuses on infrastructure and the importance of creating a regional foundation. But this is not just infrastructure in terms of broadband capabilities, et cetera. I'll leave that to another day. It's rather about creating habits of cooperation and the mechanisms of consultation. You can criticize the report for putting process before substance, but in this case, I think it is necessary, because if you don't have the right type of fora, you won't have the right type of conversations. So we would advocate first to create a regional digital council that meets twice yearly at the ministerial level, and that helps create a network of digital ministries and agencies. We were surprised by how little interaction there seemed to be between, for example, the ministry responsible for digitalization in Bulgaria or Romania and their colleagues in similar ministries and agencies across the region. This type of digital council could be launched at the 3Cs annual summit, which would raise the profile of the effort and also reinforce the importance of digital infrastructure in the 3Cs agenda. Second, this government digital council should be linked to a private sector council comprised of leading CIOs and CTOs who are tasked with writing an annual assessment of the strengths and challenges facing regional cooperation. No one is better placed than private sector experts to understand why regional cooperation works, why it doesn't, what are the bottlenecks, and what are the real incentives that need to be created. A private sector group that would submit a report to a government group and consult with them afterwards about the implementation could be quite effective. This effort can be supplemented also by linking up national trade associations that deal with digital issues and encouraging them to create a region-wide umbrella organization. This would give them a larger voice both in national capitals and especially in Brussels. Another key recommendation in this area is for the region to establish a digitalization knowledge repository and exchange program. Basically, this is best practice sharing and lessons learned by focusing on case studies and best practices, and could be invaluable in helping each country overcome specific challenges that others have faced. It could be initiated by any one country and built up over time. An exchange program aimed at sharing the expertise of both innovators and also government officials who have dealt with how to regulate but also encourage technology and innovation could be initiated on a bilateral basis and then expanded until it becomes a technological form of Erasmus. Another set of recommendations inevitably deals with resources. And here, of course, parliaments have a key role to play. We suggest 2 steps forward. First, the EU Next Generation COVID Recovery Plan assigns 20% of each national allocation to digital expenses. Countries of the region should be creative in using those funds to build cooperation and a bigger market across the region. Can ministries of finance cooperate in submitting their plans to Brussels so that joint efforts could be funded? Obviously, the funds will go to the distinct member states, but if you know that you're going to try and do a cross-border project, you can try to get funds specifically allocated for your share of that. It's a tall order to have ministries cooperate like that across borders, but I think it's something that should be explored. And the budgetary committees of parliaments could also, of course, be involved. Second, within those budgets, governments should allocate 1% of the overall funding, digital funding, to building cooperation, not to funding projects or research programs, but to the travel and communication expenses that allow cross-border cooperation to flourish. Seed money when we're just trying to explore which projects might work or might not. And quite often you find that that is a real bottleneck. Our last set of recommendations aims to enhance Central Europe's profile within the EU on digitalization and also addresses the transatlantic relationship. So a key element that we thought was lacking was defining and driving a Central European agenda in Brussels on digitalization. This could be a key focus of the Regional Digital Council. And at its initial meeting, that council should undertake a serious stock-taking. What are Central Europe's priorities, and are they adequately reflected in the EU legislative process? This can also happen through the political groups. How does the perspective of Homeland Union match that of EPP or the Liberal Party with Renew? They won't match 100%, even under ideal circumstances, but to what degree have Lithuanian priorities been advanced in Brussels? An important step forward in creating a Central European agenda would be to establish standing working groups, cross-border working groups, cross-government boarding groups, on key issues such as data governance, competition policy, AI, platform liability, and other matters that are tops on the current European agenda. Second, our conversations in the task force and with regional experts revealed that the single most important EU innovation in this policy area was the digital single market. The project is far from complete and probably could use a burst of new energy. But for most Central European economies, the huge market that this would open would be a game changer that is needed to advance economies to the next level. Central Europe could play a vital role in mapping out how to remove the many remaining barriers in the DSM, especially in digital public services, but not only that. Finally, a few words about the impact of this on the transatlantic relationship. The past 4 years, there was little interest in digital policy by the US administration, with the exception of digital tax. The Trump administration did not pursue any initiatives in this area at home, and it wasn't really watching what was going on elsewhere. This has changed. It is already clear that the Biden administration has many more tech-savvy officials, and they're aware of Europe's position as a regulatory superpower in digitalization. But that Europe, in their view, is comprised of France and Germany. Central Europe has very little relevance. By choosing issues carefully, you could change that perception. Cybersecurity standards for AI, IoT, blockchain, these are all areas where US and EU interests coincide and that Central Europe could help push. Resilience in digital infrastructure is a key element that we should all be looking at. This is a big positive agenda and one that can enhance the security of all of us in this digital age. There are some key arenas that offer opportunities for engagement across the Atlantic. One is the 3Cs initiative. There has been some questioning that I have heard just generally about whether the 3Cs will continue to have US support. Something that was supported very much by the Trump administration. Will it continue to be supported by the Biden administration? The early answer is yes. We continue to see engagement on this, and that many of those going into the Biden administration, they have strong backgrounds in Central Europe, and they very much appreciate the motives and the energy behind the 3Cs initiative. So the question is, can 3Cs, which has been primarily focused on energy and on transport, pick up the third leg of the stool, which is digital, and become more of a forum where the US, the EU, and Central Europe in particular can talk about cross-border cooperation. The Summit of Democracies is another forum. President Biden has promised to hold this in his first year. My understanding is that later in the year is more likely, given those other priorities. But this can become a forum for a very deep discussion of disinformation, content moderation, and other related issues. Central Europe has a lot of experience with these issues, and I think that could be very big contributors to the agenda and to the takeaways from that meeting. Finally, the EU has, of course, as you know, put forward a proposal for a joint EU-US agenda, which includes some tech components, including a Tech and Trade Council and an AI Accord. It's early days right now. The administration will spend the next few months getting its people in place, and then they will spend their time learning their portfolios. But there are some interesting ideas in that proposal. The question for you is whether, when we talk about a US-EU agenda, will Central Europe be at the table on the EU side, and in what strength and what form? So what are the priorities for Central Europe in that agenda that has been put forward, and how will you interact with the US in working to make some of those a reality? So let me stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Francis, very much indeed for the broadening the picture, and especially for very political recommendations, which we could use in our digital file, broadening, as I said, perspective, especially transatlantic one. So, dear colleagues, it's time for the questions. At the moment, I don't see any raised hands, but may I ask Minister Žylius to add, having in mind the fact that you were participating in studies preparation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Francis, hello, Thomas. Dear members of committee. So I would say Francis gave a very detailed picture on what of the report, and what specifically I wanted to stress that she gave a picture of the practical attributes. So what Thomas said about the overall necessity and of the potential of the digitization. I think what the report that the Atlantic Council prepared and Francis gave a perfect presentation was that there are practical tools suggested how to make these potentials into something that can work for the region, something that we can implement and expect results reasonably expect these results. And what I wanted to just maybe to reiterate that when we talk about digitization, we have to remember that the digitization in itself is not a strategy for competitiveness. It is really a strategy for survival, because like fax is not a strategy of competitiveness when we remember from all times. It just, when everybody is doing it, you just have to do it in order to stay afloat. But the opportunities that digitization provides is the huge changing landscapes of industries. For example, what we see in energy sector, in medical sector, and so on. So what I would take from this discussion overall, that these changes and the digitization in itself brings up opportunities where such countries as ours, small countries as Lithuania, and the regions like Central Eastern Europe, what can do is, in fact, invent or jump on the newly emerging markets or newly emerging industries by building their kind of industrial policies and have a competitive edge against Germany, against France, against the United States. So basically what I want to say, digitization in itself is not something that will propel us forward. But due to digitization, if we apply these policies as Francis described, we can invent really industries that will be creating wealth for our country and our region. And for this, to my understanding, what's extremely important is to change our usual way of thinking, where, for example, what we used to do, that we used to develop capabilities of industries, capabilities that are needed somewhere else. So we are, as Lithuania, we are supplying services and goods for other countries. And that's why basically we are standing in the low value chain or low levels of value chain, because the orchestration is done somewhere else. But when we are starting to solve our own problem or regional problems like energy, healthcare, in this kind of changing times, we can really create a very significant home markets, attract talent, attract investments, and kind of create something interesting, valuable here. So just to, I'm not sure if this makes brings a lot of light, but wanted to just reiterate that these potentials that Thomas described and the practical tools that Francis described, I believe, can help us to really see how to grasp this potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Rimantas. right points for the discussions. I just have one question to address to Thomas. I read more or less carefully the report. Do you propose some regional cooperation ideas in that field, or simply you just checked what's going on in separate countries? Of course, emphasizing some common tendencies and things like that. But it's possible to find in your report some ideas on possible regional cooperation. I perfectly understand your remark at the beginning of your presentation that sorry, Estonia is in another category of the states. But coming back to the question.
Yes, I think, as you see, the digital businesses, they grow with scale, and scale matters a lot. And we had multiple discussions with businesses that actually started the startups in Central Europe, and then they moved to US. And we're asking them why. And the first answer is because we can gain scale, we can access talent, and we can access capital. And then, it gives us a very clear direction. And this is just, I put this as an example, but clearly you could see that scale matters and lack of boundaries matters for the businesses. If we put boundaries with regards to legislation, with regards to accessibility of the markets, with regards to scalability of their operations, it will be just more difficult for them. And let's imagine, that you have a business in Lithuania that you want to scale up. It could be a great idea to do it very quickly, but then if you want to move across the countries, you need to have websites, entities across all of the jurisdictions, and that just takes an effort for the business. And therefore, scale matters, and that's why I think collaboration matters a lot in terms of removing the boundaries and helping to have a common agenda to actually foster growth of digitization across. And I could only subscribe to the words that are they're actually amplifying this need, because I think, in today's world, the region itself, it is not only, it's not competing against each other. There's no competition between the digital challenger states. I'll clearly tell you that. This is a global game between the global players. And in order to enable yourself and your entrepreneurs to scale up, we need to have environment and conditions for them to succeed.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Thank you. So we're talking about the stimulus and the positive sides, possibilities which are opened by digital file. Have you noticed some negative effects of digitalization in itself?
I see that also Francis is raising a hand for a comment, but maybe I'll try to address and then hand it over. Look, I think, this is why we emphasize so much that there is a lifelong education need. Actually, there is an accessibility. So also, if we foster digitization, we don't want to leave part of our society not able to access these services. And, we can clearly see that age is not a boundary. It's a matter of, learning and understanding. And we see that 40% of 65 and above access digital services forced by COVID to some extent. And therefore, what we say is actually, it really matters a lot that it's not only about the early age education and the graduates that we have, but it's also about the businesses to help their employees to reskill, to access digital talents. And we've seen great programs, we've seen companies like the largest ones in the world that are actually pursuing a mass scale reskilling programs to shift sometimes their frontline people to be able to work in a digital space. And the same applies also to the societies. So actually, it is not only about providing the services, but then also making them accessible in an easy way to a broad range of citizens, regardless if they are in the largest cities or in the rural sites, if they are young or if they are elderly, or if they are highly educated, or if they have basic education. I think if you want to scale it up, we need to make it accessible to all.
Francis, please.
So 2 points. First, to return to the point of scaling and the challenges involved in companies scaling up. I very much agree with Tomasz, and I have also seen and heard the same comments to deal with Western European countries. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Tallinn or Berlin or Bucharest, you still face challenges scaling up within the EU. And this is in large part because of the way the finances are done. And I think that one of the things that has been very much neglected in the current debate in Brussels about digitalization, and amidst all the really tsunami of regulation that the EU has coming down the pike, is capital markets union. And I think the question is, why has this portfolio been stuck for a while? And whether the proposal, as it has been for a couple of years now, adequately addresses the needs for freeing up capital in the digital space and for helping these companies to scale up and making enough capital and flexible capital available within the union. So this is an issue that is not just Central European. It is also about the digital single market, and it's also bringing that together with the financing in the capital markets union portfolio. On the disadvantages of digitalization, I would very much underscore the importance of overcoming the digital divide. We have in the United States a significant divide between rural and urban. Because of the distances, just providing broadband can be quite a challenge. And also divisions between those who are already on the lower end of the economic ladder, who are not getting the education, who literally are living from paycheck to paycheck, so they can't afford some of the things such as paying for Wi-Fi and things like that, or having up-to-date equipment that we all kind of assume. But I would also say that we need a serious effort to educate our citizens, not only about how to use the digital space, but how to be good digital citizens. We have had spread not only in the United States, but in Europe as well, of conspiracy theories and other elements of digital mayhem, I think we can call it. And I think that our citizens need to understand that if they are getting news off the internet, the internet makes news from all different sources much more accessible, but it doesn't provide the filters. And it, in fact, is also, at least here, influencing traditional media as well. So it's not just the internet where you see these things. You'll see it as well in commentary on regular news shows. But I think that we need to start educating our citizens more about how to discern what is real, what is not, what the internet can be used for, and where there should be questions asked. So I would point to those as the two big disadvantages.
Okay, thank you. More questions? I'm just applying to my colleagues from the committee. So I said that we received hard copies of your report just before the meeting, and as I said, we'll distribute immediately them. And I hope, having in mind that this direction of committee's activity will be among the top priorities. So I hope that the members of committee will look through more carefully through your reports, especially through your recommendations. Deeply thank you for your attention to the region and for Lithuania especially in that context, and hope that your studies and your attention will be in the same field on your priorities list as well. And I hope that we'll meet each other possibly in that way, possibly not, but I have no doubt that in the near future we'll try to connect with you once again when the situation here in Lithuania will be more clear for a committee. What was said by your presentations, all the tendencies we of course noticed as well, not so deeply probably, but some strategies are prepared here in Lithuania. We need to check they're working or not. But for instance, our strategy on artificial intelligence, even by the Finns, the Parliament of Finland has the same committee, the Committee for the Future, which was established in 1994. Even. And they said that your strategy, at least on the paper, looks so fine that we need to copy it. So I hope that issue, I mean, all digital file, of course, will among our priorities. And of course, as Lucas said during conversations, that this file is in very connected way with a green course. It's no doubt. It was rightly noticed that digital file is in connection with energy resources. We know what it means, and now we are rethinking our energy strategy as well. And I guess it's the same passes in which we need to think. Of course, we're thinking about 5G, not only in security terms, as you know, Lithuania signed the agreement with the United States what concerns 5G, but we're facing even geopolitical challenges from Russia's side on infrastructure of 5G, having in mind the military equipment in Kaliningrad region, which covers one set of Lithuanian territory. So when from one side, we're optimistic about the digital file and its success here in Lithuania, in the region. But sometimes we look to some troubles which exist really in that field, and regional cooperation, not on digital file, but in political sense. On that sense, it would be very supportive for Lithuania as well. So once again, Francis, Tomasz, thank you very much for your time. I know that in Washington, D.C. it's early morning, and the snow is still continuing. So the same in Lithuania. So once again, Tomasz, Francis, Rimantas, dear colleagues from the committee, thank you very much for being with us, and goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.